Hello, Chameleon Wranglers. Today we are going to be talking about terrariums and vivariums and bioactive and drainage. And with me today is Ferdy Timmerman. Ferdy, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Bill.
You may recognize his name because he is an incredibly talented photographer, and you've probably seen his work on social media. Ferdy, it's absolutely beautiful.
Thank you.
But of course, here in the Chameleon Academy podcast, when we have a world-class photographer on, we ask him about how he drains his vivariums.
Yeah, sure. I don't publish a lot on that, so yeah.
That's right. This conversation came out because we, on the Chameleon Academy, we've been talking about bioactive enclosures, and we've been talking about drainage. And so Ferdy gave me some insight into how he does his drainage, and what he does is what we call external drainage. And so he actually has water coming out. So whereas a common way of doing it is to have drainage inside the cage, so you have a drainage layer, but the water doesn't get out. And so Ferdy, let's go ahead and start from the beginning and explain a little bit about from a high level, your keeping strategy in the cages that you keep right now.
Okay. Well, like if you watch behind me, I have some tall enclosures that I used to keep a lot of chameleon species in. But at some point, I started asking myself if I still wanted to have a collection of chameleons because I found it fairly high maintenance. And I started looking into other animal species, and I actually landed on arboreal vipers. So these are my old chameleon enclosures. I nowadays only keep one panther chameleon, and in the rest I keep some arboreal viper species. On the left I still have some more tall enclosures and some drier setups. I have experience with venomous snakes, but not in captivity. So I started asking myself, what are the conditions that I want to have to be able to keep them in the safest way possible? And one clear condition was that I had to minimize moments of contact with the animals. Mm. So that meant I had to install a misting system. And yeah, from that, I started thinking about, well, if I want to be able to control how much water I get in, I need to think about what happens with water in the substrate. So I started considering installing a drainage system as well.
Okay, well, let's go back. What species of vipers do you keep?
Just some small bamboo vipers, so in the genus of Trimeresurus. Okay. Try to pronounce that the American way. Like so Southeast Asian like bamboo vipers, and also I have some bush vipers, so African species, and eyelash vipers from Central America.
Oh, very nice. Yeah, as far as Latin, we all pronounce it differently, and we like to argue about how to pronounce it. What are the specific challenges of having a venomous reptile? And your audience right now is mostly chameleon people, and we're just scared about a bite drawing blood. This is a little bit of a new world, so ease us into this.
All right. Well, the biggest challenge, of course, is keeping it safe and preventing a bite incident. So you need to be like as cautious as you can possibly be, like in a lot of ways. So in terms of watering the cage and providing drinking water for the animal, providing food. Like I use incredibly long tweezers, like it doesn't even fit on the screen, of course. Mm-hmm. Handling, and minimize it, and only do it when you need to check on the animal or if the cage needs maintenance. What else? Of course, you need to have a lock on the terrarium. I even have locks on the panels that I close off my lighting areas. There is no way that you can have contact with the snake unless I open the cage with a key and you get your hand inside or whatever. So those are just a few of the challenges.
How dangerous is their venom?
That depends a lot on the species, of course. But the species I keep, they shouldn't be like lethal in case of a bite. The biggest threat would be if you are allergic to the venom, and if you, how do you say that, like get into anaphylactic shock.
Yeah.
So if that happens, well, it can also happen with a bee sting, of course. But then like that is a life threatening situation, and then you probably have, I don't know, minutes. Um, yeah,
Okay.
before you, I don't know, you start to die. But otherwise, like if I get a bite on one of my fingers, I just need to make sure that I leave this place in the safest way, and then just rush to the hospital. Or like, there's always a second person around when I have, when I open the cages. So that second person, my girlfriend, would then drive me to the hospital, or I don't know. We call 112, your like the 911 version here.
Okay. How likely are they to bite you if you are in the cage doing maintenance?
Very.
Okay.
So they like these are pit vipers. They have heat pits like in between the eyes and the nostril, and they sense heat, and they just respond to that change in their environment.
Okay.
So they're just hungry and happy to feed on whatever comes into their environment. And if I am like attached to that small pit they can see in the cage, then they just bite and then find out too late,
Uh-huh. Okay.
which would ruin my day.
All right. So this is a very interesting question. We have they are arboreal vipers, and chameleons are arboreal lizards. What differences are there in the captive husbandry of these as far as the environmental conditions in creating their environment?
um, like if you compare the snakes that I keep now to the smaller chameleon species that are from rainforest areas, I don't think there are a lot of differences. I would not change my setup. Maybe just install some more climbing branches for them. Snakes perch on bigger branches. Chameleons just want to roam around and use smaller twigs and whatever. So that would probably be the only change that I would make.
Yeah, I always like to point out to my listeners and viewers that everything that we learn about chameleons is not about chameleons, it's about arboreal reptiles. And it's amazing how many other reptiles would do well under those same conditions. What are your experiences in keeping chameleons in these fully naturalistic and bioactive enclosures?
Well, I always used to have like bioactive enclosures, but just not with a proper drainage system and a nice misting system. So, like my experience are comparable to what I'm doing now, but like right now I just have a lot more plants growing in there, so it looks much nicer, and like humidity levels and the times that I can offer drinking water just improved like a lot. So what I used to do was daily misting by hand, and then still the environment would be humid enough to have springtails in the substrate. And at that time also, like I never really cleaned the enclosures because like animals decomposing the chameleon feces would just take care of the turnover of those nutrients.
So, in the bioactive or naturalistic enclosures, we can put plants in the bottom, and that's good for the smaller species. But for something like the larger species, like a panther chameleon, where they're going to want to be able to have some sort of feel some sort of security, be able to be in the plants, how do you handle getting foliage up up to where the chameleon's going to be?
Well, one plant that I've always used for like any chameleon species that I kept was the Ficus benjamina, because it's like a sturdy structure for them to climb onto, and it has a lot of small leaves, which means a lot of surface area where drinking water will attach to. But other than that, for the bigger chameleon species, in my opinion, Epipremnum aureum, or I think you call them pothos, is a very suitable plant because It can take like Chameleon behavior, let's put it like that. And it will just climb into the like higher parts of the terrarium very well. And if it reaches that, it'll just drop down and then climb up again. So it makes a very nice and lush environment.
So you plant it in the bottom and let it climb up and then circle around?
Yeah, that is what I used to do, and that's still the way that my Chameleon enclosure is set up. But for
Okay.
the snakes, I like nowadays I build my own backgrounds, and they're like in a 3D way. I use foam and plant pots also, so I can like plant things higher up on the walls.
Okay.
Um, yeah, well, and then they
Okay.
just climb onto the walls. Yeah.
All right. So we get to drainage, and a very common way of doing drainage is you have the leca clay balls at the bottom, a substrate barrier, and then the substrate. Is this a decision, a conscious decision you made to have external drainage, or is it just the way things are done?
No, I used to not have it, and then I noticed that if I missed it, the amount of water that I wanted available for the chameleon and for the plants too, like for the relative humidity, that you can get a pretty like sludgy, swampy substrate. So I figured, okay, this is not the way because it's getting too wet, and then I had to cut down the amount of water that I provided, and then yeah, your husbandry is forced to change, but you actually don't want it. So then I figured I need some way to drain that bottom layer of water.
Okay, so let's go into how did you actually step by step and talking about how you did it. How do you create a drainage layer? And maybe we ought to start with what type of cages are you using? Out of what material are you working with?
My cages are made of 4 millimeter thick glass panels.
Okay.
So that means if you want to install a drainage system, of course you need to drill a hole in the glass, and that is too easy. I was scared to break the panels, but I actually in my Instagram page I did a small tutorial on that. So if people are scared, then just go check it out.
Okay.
But then I installed a system of PVC pipes, so the drainage system is connected like throughout the whole setup, and it is attached to like the last pipe will just go underneath the door outside, and it runs into the rain pipe on the balcony.
Okay.
So all excess water goes out there. And the substrate is very comparable to how you explained it. So I have like a layer of those leca clay balls. I don't know what the correct term is.
Hydro balls, like clay
Yeah,
balls.
yeah. So I have them like taped into a bag, like a flattened bag of anti-root fabric. And on top of that, there's just a layer of potting soil. And you can like if it still gets a little sludgy, you can add like play sand to the potting soil of maybe perlite or cocoa husk, as long as it's not a danger for the chameleon in terms of constipation, if they accidentally grab something.
Now, have you kept cages in the tradition? Well, I won't say traditional, in the closed system manner where you don't have the external drainage.
Well, yeah, kind of, but I mean, that was in the time that I didn't provide as much water as I do
Okay.
now. So like I have my system set up into like floors, you could say, and the top floor, of course, gets heat from the heat bulbs beneath that. So the substrate in the top floor will dry out because of that heat a little bit.
Okay.
So
So could you compare the experiences, the pros and cons, advantages and disadvantages, or maybe we'll just say the characteristics between the two systems? And with the context of people out there trying to make a decision as to how they set up their system, what are the different characteristics between the two?
Well, I think the biggest difference is that, like in a closed system, you can, if you don't control the amount of water, like to the exact amount that your cage can take, there is always a big risk of getting stagnant water in the bottom, and things will start decomposing anaerobically. So they will start to stink and start to rot. And I don't know if that has any health risks for the chameleon. But at least if you open up the cage and start moving around the soil, it stinks very bad. So
Well,
in that perspective, I wouldn't go back to a closed system, like never.
yeah, it'll certainly kill all of your life, your isopods and such, and create a dirty, gross mess down there because nothing's eating the poop. So now you've got poop, soup,
Yeah.
and dead bodies, which is always fun. So yeah, it can't be
Yeah.
hygienic. So yes, you do need to keep a balance.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about your experiences with this system. How do you decide how to hydrate and how much to hydrate?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, I have the misting system on for 4 times a day now, which sounds like a lot, but it runs for like 30 seconds or so. Um, and I used to have almost double that amount. Um, and the biggest reason for cutting it back was that I got fungus on the ceiling.
Oh, okay.
So I figured, well, maybe I just need to change something and see if that improves things, and it does. And like the plants are still thriving, and still like the animals have drinking water available 4 times a day. And other than that, well, like determining how much water you need, I think also largely depends on the animals, like the climate that they're from, and also like which plants do you want to keep. So I'm also like a bit of a plant keeper. So I have enclosures that have mosses in there, and they need water on a very regular basis. Otherwise, they just dry out, and then it looks like a mess.
And do you use fogging at all?
I don't. I considered it, but I don't think it's necessary here.
Okay. So now with those plants that you've got there, and we talked about pothos or
Epipremnum.
thank you,
Aurea.
thank you very
Yeah.
much. When you have those in the cage, which are wonderful because they're prolific, how do you keep them from blocking out the light for the other plants?
Yeah. I don't keep them in my snake enclosures because that is indeed a problem. They grow vigorously, and if it goes too fast, then I have to trim too regularly. That means contact with my snakes, which
Yeah,
I want to avoid.
I just thought about how much time I have to be in my cage and thinking, that's not possible
Yeah.
for Ferdy.
Yeah. So like in the panther chameleon cage, well, the panther chameleon also makes sure it climbs on the like on the stems and just pulls it down every now and then. So he kind of maintains the setup a little bit for me. And also the Ficus benjamina blocks out a lot of light already, so the pothos grows fairly slowly in there. But then, yeah, just like every now and then, I just cut it down and yeah, don't
Okay.
think about it. Yeah.
What are you looking for to make sure that the health of your system is maintained and that you're not giving too much water or too little?
Well, of course, you also like you always need to check out your animals. So if they're well hydrated, like that is visible on the outside. And you need to check if you see them drink. So observe the animals and see if they jump on top of the water each time, then maybe increase the duration of the how do you call it, like the duration of misting, like each turn.
Yeah, with the chameleons, when I start people off and have beginners, I always have them look at the poop and say, okay, that's a great way for beginners to start learning about hydration. But once we go to a naturalistic bioactive situation, now you got to watch the animal, and that's the only way
Yeah.
you've got.
Yeah.
All right, well, what are your plans going forward for your collection?
That is a good question. I kind of have all the animals that I would like to have right now. So I am just working through all the setups to make them like as naturalistic as I can possibly do, including the dryer setups, which I have on that side. They are not bioactive, but I also do a lot of things with making fake rocks, and I just check out habitat photos and see if I can copy that like into the enclosures. Um, and in that perspective, the chameleon is I think falling behind a little bit on the rest of the animals. So he's pretty high on the list on getting an upgrade too.
Okay.
But then I just need to consider like how to properly do it because well of their clumsy behavior and they will probably tear down a lot more than snakes do.
All right. Well, I can't leave this interview without touching on this. Uh, Tell us a little bit about your photography. Is this is this a hobby? Do you do it as a profession?
No, it's a hobby. Well, it still is, yeah. But sometimes in my profession as an ecologist, like those skills, they come in very handy. So, like actually a couple of weeks ago, I was asked by a few people to drop by a bat catching site, like late at night, because they needed photographs of bats.
Okay.
And well, that's like it's still not my profession. I'm an ecologist, but I got paid for the hours I put into that. So
Okay. So yeah, you're professional.
yeah, of course.
Well, what do you do as an ecologist?
Well,
I mean,
that is
this
like
I just keep pulling up different layers and
yeah,
finding out all
yeah.
sorts of different stuff about you, Ferdy.
Yeah, sure. Well,
You're
I
more
work
than
for
just a drainage strategy.
of course, yeah. That's just part of my life. So I work for a consultancy company. I never explained this in English, so I have to think about
Okay.
some stuff. But like our customers do a lot of things in development. Like they want to build houses or renovate stuff, and then like there are always some laws and legislation on nature that are involved, and so they have to call us up and ask if I want to like if we want to check out if there are protected species and all. And if there are, then they need a permit to break the law within certain conditions, and I have to guide them through the whole process. And other than that, we do surveys of water bodies and natural areas sometimes, but also farmlands, which is a very hot topic in the Netherlands at the moment.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, is there anything else you'd like to share with us about creating terrariums, drainage, misting, lighting plants?
Oh yeah, well, actually, lighting is one of the things that I also changed in the past few years because I just used to have a UV bulb and a heating bulb for my chameleons.
Uh-huh.
Um, but for the plants, actually, I realized I didn't have enough light on top of
Okay.
my
Yeah.
enclosures, and now I'm using these LED lights. They're very bright, and they're like 6400 Kelvin. So the color is close to natural sunlight. And actually, I installed those, and like the chameleons, they responded to that in terms of showing color. Because of course, in Madagascar, the intensity of light is so incredibly high. A UV bulb and a heating bulb are nothing compared to what they experience in the wild. So having a higher intensity of light, even though it doesn't provide heat or UV, does add something to your setup.
Well, Ferdy, I want to thank you very much for coming on and sharing about your experiences. We need all these different perspectives.
Sure, you're welcome.